Ladies and gentlemen, I see that there are a lot of new people here, so first I want to introduce myself. I'm Rabbi Dovid Schwartz. Maybe some of you came here expecting to hear Rabbi Turk. I'm subbing for Rabbi Turk for the summertime, or at least for July. I also want to acknowledge our partners and collaborators, TorahAnytime.com. This cameraman you see here is working for Torah Anytime. And if you want, you can pick up their literature on the way out there. Tremendous website. And we appreciate their making our talks available to people who can't make it in person. And it's really a website that's worth checking out. Obviously, if you're here tonight, you appreciate Torah education. And on that website, you can hear literally hundreds of some of the top lecturers today delivering talks on some of the hottest topics today. So I definitely recommend that you check it out and offer them whatever support you can. TorahAnytime.com. Okay, we're beginning a three-part series called Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, Villains in the Bible. Curious topic. Why are we doing the villains of the Bible? There's so many positive role models in the Bible. There's so many noble men and women, exalted people that we can learn from in the Bible. And the reason why I wanted to pursue this is really based on a verse in Koheles in Ecclesiastes. In the second chapter of Ecclesiastes, it says, "V'ra'isi ani sheyesh yisron l'chacham min ha'sichlus ki yisron ha'or min ha'choshech." I beheld, that the relative advantage of wisdom over folly is as great as that of light over darkness. That's a traditional way to interpret the verse. However, thank you very much. So the pasuk in Koheles says that the relative advantage of wisdom over folly is as great as that of light over darkness. That's a traditional translation. However, Rav Tzadok HaKohen of Lublin and others have used a technique whereby the Hebrew word min, okay, the word min, or the prefix letter at mem, can be either what's called the mem hatolda or the mem hayisron. It could either mean a relative advantage, or it could be derivative, such as hamotzi lechem min haaretz, who draws bread out of the ground. Not that bread is greater than the ground, it draws bread out of the ground. Okay? And very often in midrashic literature, post-midrashic homiletics, these two usages of the word min are interchangeable. So the way Reb Tzadok HaKohen reads this pasuk is, Ki yisron ha'or min ha'choshech. The advantage, the relative goodness, the relative efficacy of light can only be known from darkness. Now, try to imagine if you never experienced darkness in your life. You wouldn't know how good it is, to be sitting in daylight. I'm a native Los Angeles person. I grew up in LA. And try to imagine 250 plus days a year where you have to run neither your air conditioner nor your heat. We don't call it steam in LA. There's no radiators. It's all forced air, right? As a kid growing up, even as a young adult, I didn't think twice about it. Until I moved to New York City, and I only had 10 or 12 of those days a year. And certainly once I became a homeowner, I started getting hit in the pocketbook. Right? So very often we have to do studies and contrasts. We have to, very often in aptitude and intelligence tests, they'll have sequences of words, and you're supposed to show your real understanding of a word, but sometimes by appreciating an antonym. So that's one reason why I wanted to look in a certain sense at the dark side, the dark underbelly, if you will, of certain biblical characters. And another reason is that very often we at the Jewish Heritage Center put a great emphasis, and I think in all of our classes, no matter what the particular topic is, if it's Bible study, if it's a title series, we're always looking into midos, into character development. And there are many in the catalog, if you will, in the Mussar literature, in the moral ethical literature of Judaism. You'll look up a table of contents, and you'll have a listing of generally good, positive, good for the common weal, midos, humility, patience, happiness, generosity, right? And then on the other side of the table of contents, you'll have the negative midos, anger, jealousy, envy, lust. You go through the table of contents. But sometimes it's not so clear-cut. Where it gets really, really tricky is when you have an erzatz midah masquerading as a good one. Case in point, okay? Humility is really one of the toughest of all the positive midos, the positive character traits to understand. And a lot of people will see symptoms that are really coming from an unhealthy place, that are really about low self-esteem, inferiority complex. Oh, that must be a humble person. All right? People will see an excess of passivity, shall we call it, and say, oh, that's patience. Sometimes it's patience, and sometimes it's making what we call in Yiddish a shmata out of yourself. You're making a doormat out of yourself, and so on. And I think that at least in the opening class here, we're here tonight to study Eisav. For those of you, I'm not going to presume any prior knowledge. I'll give you a thumbnail sketch of the narratives about Eisav that we're going to be studying tonight. But the thing about Eisav is that, according to classical Jewish thinkers, he is, in a certain sense, the waste byproduct, or the erzatz, the imitation, aping the good midos, the holy, the sanctified, rarefied midos of his parents, and in particular of his father. And it's a nuanced thing. It's kind of subtle, but you've got to be able to pick up on it, how the good is separated from the bad, not in so much in terms of an antonym, but in terms of a shading. Okay, let me first allude to, we have the Chumash in front of us, so let's just go very quickly. I'm not going to read a lot of psukim inside, but let's just look at the pertinent passages quickly, and then I'll talk a little bit more about the person of Eisav himself. Okay. Page 117, the beginning of Parshas Toldos. Okay, and the chapter heading is Jacob and Esau. Esau is how it's always transliterated into English. I'm going to use the Hebrew pronunciation throughout the night, Eisav. Okay, the person we're talking about is Eisav. These are the chronicles of Isaac, son of Abraham. Abraham was Isaac's father. When Isaac was 40 years old, he married Rebekah, the daughter of Besuel, the Aramean of Padan Aram, and the sister of Laban the Aramean. Okay, that's what we call a yichus brief. Let's bring you up to speed on the family's genealogy to this point. But here's what's actually happening. Let's skip down a few lines. Verse 23. God's word to her was, okay, Rebekah got pregnant, and she got pregnant with twins. God's word to her was, 2 nations are in your womb, 2 governments will separate from inside you, the upper hand will go from one government to the other, the greater one will serve the younger. When the time came for her to give birth, there were twins in her womb. The first one came out reddish, as hairy as a fur coat. They named him Eisav. His brother then emerged, and his hand was grasping Esav's heel. Yitzchak, Isaac that is, named him Yaakov. Isaac was 60 years old when Rebekah gave birth to the boys. The boys grew up. Eisav became a skilled trapper, man of the field. Jacob was a scholarly man who remained within the tents. Isaac enjoyed eating Esav's game and favored him, but Rebekah favored Yaakov. Okay, so synopsis in a nutshell. We're talking about twins here. We're talking about twins of destiny. All right, the word of God comes to the mother and says, these are 2 governments, these are 2 historical figures, they're going to be the patriarchs of great nations, and they're always going to be engaged in a power struggle. One will take the upper hand from the other, and ultimately the greater shall serve the younger. That's the prophecy over here. And then it goes on to describe their characteristics at birth. It's a lot more detailed, speaking about Eisav, the older boy, the older twin, than Yaakov, the younger twin. He's ruddy, he's hirsute, The actual name Eisav, according to the great commentaries, means that he was also complete and finished. Not only was he hirsute, I mean, a lot of babies are born with hair and it falls off. His hair was like a sign of maturity. It was not so much he was a child as a miniature man. From birth, already completed. And that's the etymology of the word Eisav. Eisav is the same letters in Hebrew, in biblical Hebrew, as the word asu. Okay? Our native Hebrew speaker here, asu means done, did, finished. Okay? And that's how it's interpreted by the earliest of commentators. Eisav was so called because he was completed, he was finished. He was born finished. There's no need for childhood and adolescence and puberty. A finished product, a miniature product, but a finished product at birth. Okay. The next chapter in their lives actually occurs. You don't have to turn any pages. It occurs many years later, but it's adjacent. Verse 29 at the bottom of page 117. Yaakov was once simmering a stew when Eisav came home exhausted from the field. Eisav said to Yaakov, "Give me a swallow of that red stuff. I'm famished." He was therefore given the name Edom. Okay, interestingly enough, Edom is the Hebrew word for red. He was also ruddy at birth. "First sell me your birthright," replied Yaakov. "Here I am about to die," exclaimed Eisav. "What good is a birthright to me?" "Make an oath to me right now," said Yaakov. He made the oath and sold his birthright to Yaakov. Yaakov then gave Eisav bread and lentil stew. Eisav ate it, drank, got up and left. He thus rejected the birthright. Okay, synopsis of this little story is Eisav was already described as a trapper, as a hunter. He's particularly exhausted from one of his day's hunting game. And at this point, when he's most exhausted, Yaakov exercises the full advantage over him. Basically, he's got him up against the wall. It seems like if he doesn't get this lentil stew, he's going to die. Okay, it's hard to imagine. I mean, from one day of hunting in the field, it's not like he was on a hunger strike for 5 weeks here, or, if he was dehydrated, you should be asking for water, not for a stew. But at any rate, that's what the plain meaning of the text seems to say. And Yaakov presses his advantage and says that if you want this lentil stew, you're going to have to sell me your birthright. And he goes through with the sale. Okay. One more episode, and then we're ready to start analyzing it. Okay, turn to page 123. Okay, here I'm not going to read it inside. You can scan it. Feel free while I'm talking, basically, to look page 123 through 127. It's too long. It'll take up too much of the class. But the thumbnail sketch is as follows. We already know that Yitzchak favors Eisav. We read about that already. The father favors the firstborn son, the biologically firstborn son. He's now an old man. His eyesight is fading. And it's time to give the pre-demise brachos, the blessings, to his children. And obviously the lion's share of the blessings is going to go to the firstborn son. So the father commands Eisav, "I want you to go out and trap some game for me and prepare it the way I really like it. And that will put me in the right psychological / spiritual frame of mind, frame of soul, to be able to bless you properly." Okay. The mother, Rivka, gets wind of this, and she advises the younger son to use subterfuge to, as it were, procure, I'm not going to use the word steal, but procure the brachas, procure the lion's share of the blessings. Here's what you do. Bring me 2 goats, slaughter them, kosher, obviously, slaughter them properly. I'll prepare them in a way where they taste gamey, just like venison that supposedly your brother's going to bring for your father. In the meantime, Dad can't see anymore. We have to be worried about tactile stimulation over here. I'll take the goats' skins. We'll have to skin the goats. We'll use that to cover your arms, so that if he suspects anything, and he feels you, and he's expecting to feel the hirsute twin brother, you'll feel just like him. And so it goes. Yitzchak gets suspicious, right? He asks him, how did you get back from the hunt so quickly? Yaakov responds, well, the Lord your God helped me out. He caused the animals to come towards me. That's how I was able to get back so quickly. Then he utters the famous prophetic words, Hakol kol Yaakov hayadayim b'yadei Eisav. The voice is Jacob's voice, but the arms are the arms of Eisav. In other words, you sound, from the way you're speaking, you sound like Yaakov, but I felt your arms, and your arms feel like those of Eisav. And ultimately, he gets the lion's share of the blessings. Eisav comes a little bit later. Everyone realizes that they've been had, as it were. And ultimately, the blessing that Yitzchak has left over for Eisav is, Al charbecha techya. You'll live by your sword. That was the blessing that he gave to Eisav. So, those are the narratives that we're going to be touching upon and dealing with tonight. Suffice it to say that I chose Eisav. I mean, there's no shortage of villains in the Bible, believe it or not. Again, everyone thinks, oh, it's a sacred book, it's got to be, hagiographies, it's only got the biographies of saints in there. There are plenty of no-goodniks in the Bible, some overt, some covert, but I wanted to start with a covert one, because the truth of the matter is that when you read these narratives in a hyper-literal way, Eisav comes out smelling like a rose, and our own patriarch, Jacob, comes out sneaky, underhanded, exploitive, and believe me, churchmen and anti-Semites throughout the ages have been reading it that way. They haven't bothered to go subtextually at all. They read what meets the eyes. And Eisav comes across as, a country-strong outdoorsman, but certainly doesn't seem like a bad guy. What do you do bad over here? Because he was hungry for a lentil stew one day, Yeah, the Torah says that he humiliated the birthright. He scorned the birthright. Okay. Maybe he scorned the birthright, but, the guy was about to die. Have a little empathy for him. It's somewhat understandable. So, I felt that, as a frustrated journalism student, I always want to do a little muckraking. I want to get to the bottom of the story and expose this hypocrite Eisav. And suffice it to say that in Talmudic lore, in Jewish folklore, Eisav is considered an arch-villain, and a hypocritical one at that. It's not by accident that the stories about him overtly in the Torah make him come across as such an innocuous character. Our sages say that the verse in Tehillim, Yichasemenu kechazir miyar, they'll lay waste to them like the wild boar of the forest, kind of a pig, kind of a swine, refers to Eisav. That's talking about the Roman Empire's sacking of Jerusalem, the destruction of the two temples. And the Medrash explains, why is the allegory for Eisav a swine, a pig? Not because it's dirty, not because it's slovenly, it has nothing to do with that. It's because of all the non-kosher animals that lack one of the signs of kosherness. Okay, the two signs of kosherness is cloven hooves, split hooves, and to be a true ruminant, to be colloquially to chew the cud. Right? So many animals have neither. A bear isn't a ruminant, and a bear doesn't have hooves altogether. Right? But of all the animals that have one of the signs and not the other one, all the non-kosher animals, a camel is a good example, there are other examples, a camel has a solid hoof, but it's a ruminant that chews its cud. The only one that has a cloven hoof, but does not chew its cud, is the pig. And the significance of that is, it's got the external sign of kosher. Here, prove to me that you're kosher. Here, take a look at my hand. Okay? Internally, what you can't see, what's substructural, that's where the lack of kashrus, of straightness, of fitness, that's where it is. Okay? So he's the symbol of the ultimate hypocrite. Our sages tell us that, again, even though overtly in the Torah it says that Yitzchak favored Eisav because he was a hunter and brought him delicious venison, it's deeper than that. Our sages tell us that Eisav came across as ultra pious. He went overboard in his saintliness. And the example that the sages give is that there's a concept in Torah law called tithing, which means in an agrarian society, a farmer raises a crop every year, you're supposed to give away 10% of your produce. Okay? There was no middleman bureaucracy like the IRS to do the redistribution of the wealth. Every person, every farmer decided which poverty-struck individual or which Levite they wanted to give their 10% of their produce to. Actually, it turned out to be 20% per year. One tithe he gave to the Levite, and depending on the year and the cycle, the other tithe he either took to Jerusalem and consumed it there, or you distributed it among the poor. But it's obviously only for things that grow from the ground and are edible. And Eisav used to badger his father, he used to say, what's the technique for tithing salt? What's the technique for tithing straw? Okay, you don't need to tithe straw and salt. These are not foodstuffs. They're either the waste byproduct of food or they're the preservatives of food. Maybe in the case of salt that you mine that's not distilled from seawater, you may take it out of the ground, but it doesn't grow from the ground. Okay, suffice to say, these are things that don't need to be tithed. So this is the way he expressed his ultra stringency. Not only am I, tithing, 10% of my heads of cattle and my produce, I want to know how you tithe salt as well. And in Yiddish, the Yiddish colloquialism became, when you want to talk about a hypocrite, Jewish or Gentile, you would say, the chazafisel. The guy, not a rabbit's foot, the guy's with the pig's foot. And the pig's foot is that external sign of kosherness that's hiding an internal depravity. Now, again, don't get me wrong. Tonight's class is not about apologizing for Yaakov. Yaakov is not the star of tonight's class. I'm strictly speaking about Eisav. So let me talk about the midos of Yitzchak Avinu that are worthy of emulation, and how they got corrupted, or how they got erzatz, how they got this chazafisel, this perhaps some kind of shallow external similarity, but are really symptomatic of a wickedness, of an evil on the part of Eisav. Okay, let's start with the easier of the two. The first three benedictions of the silent standing devotion, colloquially known as Shmona Esrei, the mainstay of our prayer service, that we pray at least 3 times a day, correspond to the 3 patriarchs of the Jewish people. The first bracha ends with the words Magen Avram, shield of Abraham. Okay. The third is Kedusha, is holiness, sanctity, Ata Kadosh, Shemcha Kadosh, Hakel HaKadosh, the Holy God. And that corresponds to Jacob, the Yaakov Avinu, who's called by the prophet the Kedishu as Kadosh Yaakov, which is the sanctified one, Yaakov. The middle one does not mention Yitzchak by name, does not mention Isaac by name, but according to all the great commentaries on the Siddur, on the Jewish prayer book, it refers to Yitzchak, and the name of that bracha is Gvura, might. And the subject of the bracha is the resurrection of the dead. But the name of the bracha is might. Ata Gibar L'Olam Hashem, Mechayim Eisam. You are mighty God. You can quicken the dead. So we identify Yitzchak Avinu, we identify the patriarch Yitzchak with the midah, with the good, the positive character trait of might, of power, of courage, a lot of different ways to translate the word Gvura, Gibor. I want to go out of order tonight, and I want to read you something from a secular source before I tell you the Torah source. This is a passage from a soldier's prayer. Soldier's prayer was a prayer composed by General Douglas MacArthur of I Shall Return fame. Okay. Okay. Build me a son whose wishbone will not be where his backbone should be. A son who will know thee and to know himself is the fountain stone of knowledge. Then a few passages later he says as follows: build me a son who will master himself before he seeks to master other men. Okay? We're talking about a soldier. We're talking about what most people usually associate with might and power and courage and being a champion. And he says over here, I want a son, a warrior. I want a son, a soldier. It's a soldier's prayer, to have a soldier for a son. And he says it's essential to be a good soldier. Build me a son who will master himself before he seeks to master other men. Our sages take it a step further. In Pirkei Avos, in the Ethics of Our Fathers, a very, very famous Mishnah that poses the three perhaps ultimate questions. Okay? Who is powerful, who is rich, and who is honorable? Honorable and rich are not our topics for tonight. But in terms of who is powerful or who is a champion, the Hebrew goes, Eizehu Gibar, and the answer is Hakovesh es Yitzra. Who's truly powerful? Who's truly mighty? Who's truly strong? Somebody who conquers their inclination to evil. Okay, for those of you who are not familiar with the concept, let me familiarize you a little bit. Traditional Judaism teaches us that human beings are endowed with free will, and throughout our entire lives, we're always grappling, we're always being asked, the us, the personality, the thing that is us, right, is asked to cast a deciding vote between two yitzarim, two inclinations. The Yetzer Tov, the inclination or the attraction to do good, and the Yetzer Hara, the inclination to do evil. Right? This can be understood on a lot of different levels, on a psychological level, on a spiritual level. If you're not of a particularly religious frame of mind, okay, I'm not going to try to win you over to my way of looking at things in 30 seconds. Suffice it to appreciate it on a psychological level. I think that we can all admit in our moments of introspection that we all have a little inner naysayer, or in the lingo of popular psychobabble today, we're always self-sabotaging. Okay? We're always doing things that are against our self-interest. Right? Whether it's doing things on the job site, okay, that makes it a certainty that the person in the cubicle next door gets the salary raise and the promotion instead of us. Right? Whether it's torpedoing intimate relationships, being too suspicious, not trusting enough, having a short fuse, anger management issues. Okay? Many, many people do things to sabotage themselves. A bad habit, overeating, an addiction. Right? We're always doing things to sabotage ourselves. So think of that as a Yetzer Hara. An inclination, you don't like the word evil, you're uncomfortable with the word evil. Okay? An inclination to being counterproductive, to being self-sabotaging. Okay? And it takes strength to resist that. And according to the framework of the sages and the ethics of the fathers, that is really the ultimate and only strength. Any other strength is, in a certain sense, just an extension of that. Eizeu Gibu, who is the mighty one? The one who can conquer this little inner saboteur. And the proof text that they bring is something that King Solomon wrote, Umoshel Berucho Milo Kedir. Somebody who has dominion over their own spirit is more of a champion, is more of a warrior, is more greater at tactics and strategy than somebody who can capture a whole town. The ancient military world, the main mode of warfare was you laid siege to a town, and either your siege was successful or unsuccessful. Almost all the cities were walled, and you would lay siege to a city, and either you had a successful siege or an unsuccessful siege. That's called a locadir. A general who captures a whole city, that means a general who laid a successful siege. But if you can dominate your own spirit, that's the true champion. That's the true mighty one. Okay? So General MacArthur understood one as being a prerequisite for the other. Build me a son who will master himself, all right, conquer his Yetzer Hara, his little inner saboteur, and then try to master other men, whether it means internal military discipline, whether it means conquering the enemy. That's external mastery. Okay? So the way that we understand the relationship between Yitzchak and Eisav first and foremost is Yitzchak Avinu was a gibar. Yitzchak Avinu was the ethics of our father definition of a gibar, the ultimate conqueror of his inclination to evil. He was a person, according to our tradition, who had mighty inner battles, inner struggles, inner demons, if you want to call them, and came out successful in every encounter. And Eisav is the one who externalizes it, who's interested in mastery only of other men and not mastery of himself. For himself, he was unbridled. Anger, passion, total lack of self-control. Even this interface, you ever heard a guy went to hunt one day, give me that stew or I'm going to die. You're hungry? Okay, don't be a drama king, okay.
A drama king.
Yeah. Could you give me a little bit of the stew? Yeah. I'm going to die. I need it this second, No deferment of gratification. None of that. No, absolutely no bridle on himself. To other people, a dictator, a manipulator, a murderer, ultimately. Our sages tell us, what was this ruddiness all about? It says he was called Adam. It says at birth he was ruddy, and then he earned the nickname Adam, the red one, when he traded his birthright for this red stew. All right? So our sages tell us the symbolic meaning of his complexion, and his nickname is Siman hu sheyeh shofech damim. There's a harbinger of the fact that this guy is going to be a murderer, a spiller of blood. Shofech damim, one who spills blood. Yes, question?
Yes. The sages knew the 10 Commandments.
Yes, they did.
We are told to honor our parents.
Yes.
Do we honor our parents by deceiving them and lying to them?
Are you referring right now to Eisav or to Yaakov?
To Yaakov. He's the one who did it.
Okay, I told you tonight's not going to be apologetics for Yaakov. It's an excellent question, but it's a different class. I might even have it on tape or on MP3. Maybe I can email it to you, but it's not the topic tonight.
Well,
I will tell you this.
That Yaakov just briefly overcame his evil inclinations according to the sages.
Yitzchak, the father I'm talking about, not the twin brother. Yitzchak, the father of both boys.
So the father overcame his evil inclinations,
right,
which made him basically a holy person.
Exactly.
But when it comes to his sons and his preference, he's stupid.
That's another excellent question. How does a prophetic person like Yitzchak have the wool pulled over his eyes? That one I am going to address in a little while. Okay, I hope to answer you on that one. Okay. I do want to say parenthetically that while we're talking about his negative midos, okay, no person is utterly good and no person is utterly evil. Esav's redeeming characteristic was he's an exemplar of honoring one's father. Yeah. Okay? When the Talmud in Tractate Kedushin talks about the whole topic, how to fulfill the commandment of the 10 Commandments of honoring one's parents, Eisav is consistently brought as an example of this guy had the ultimate in honoring his father. Later on, the Targum Yonasan ben Uziel, when Yaakov returns from a long exile and he has his first meeting with his brother Eisav after many years of separation, he prays to God. He says, "Save me from my brother from Eisav, ki yarei anochi, I'm afraid of him." Yaakov admits, I have a fear. I'm afraid of my brother. So the Targum Yonasan ben Uziel, one of the great translators, early Aramaic translators of the Bible, sticks in parenthetically, what was he afraid of? He wasn't afraid of his military might or cunning. He wasn't afraid of the fact that, well, maybe he's in the right and I'm in the wrong. Maybe I was underhanded in my business dealings. No. I'm afraid of the spiritual merits he's accrued to himself for his exemplary honoring of parents. And so, you're onto something over here. Eisav is the paradigm in Talmudic literature for honoring one's parents. One of the Talmudic sages said he had a particularly difficult. It seems his mother was mentally imbalanced, and this guy was talking about all of the things that he did for his mother, and said, I used to think I was it when it came to honoring a parent until I studied the life of Eisav. He had me beat.
Eisav is Esau?
Esau, yeah. Okay.
And also, when Jacob, maybe he's not, didn't eat food, but nonetheless, he's his brother. He
Right.
could have given him food instead of manipulating him. He manipulated him to sell.
Okay, that part I am going to address. Okay, hold your horses.
And
We'll get
the
that in a second.
mother also encouraged deception against a man, the father, who was blind.
True.
Just so questionable behavior.
Right. Looks on the surface like Ozzy Osbourne, not like Ozzy and Harriet. Right? Okay, good. Too much to cover in one night. I can't address all the questions. These are all excellent questions, excellent topics, but let's focus in on Eisav. Okay. The next thing is as follows. There are two main motivations. They happen to be individually. We all know that there are 613 mitzvahs in the Torah, commandments in the Torah, and there are individual mitzvahs that talk about our relationship, not just with one another, but our relationship with God. V'ahavta es Hashem l'kacha, you shall love the Lord thy God. Es Hashem l'kacha tira, you should be in awe of the Lord your God. V'davakta bo, you should cleave to God. There are all kinds of individual mitzvahs of how a person is supposed to relate to God. But besides being individual mitzvahs, these two, again I'm going to call them character traits, of love and awe/fear, can be major motivational underpinnings in all of the other mitzvahs. Okay? Why do I fulfill a positive commandment? Okay? Why do I observe the Shabbos? Why do I give charity? Okay, for a moment ignoring the human aspect of it. Okay? Is it because I fear God? I'm in awe of God? Or is it because I love God? Okay? Why do I desist from assault and battery? Or from eating a non-kosher diet, as the case may be? Okay? Again, is it because I love God or is it because I fear God? We're talking about motivation here, not the actual individual mitzvah itself. And we associate the midah, the motivational midah of ahava, of love of God, to Abraham, and the motivational midah of fear, of awe, we attribute to Yitzchak Avinu, to Isaac. Later on in the Bible here, I'm not going to be able to show you exactly chapter and verse where it is. Jacob at one point makes an oath. He says, he swears, b'pachad David Yitzchak, in the fear of his father Isaac. Okay, that was his theology. That's how he described God. That entity that my father feared. Okay, so we associate worship through fear. We associate with Isaac. There are several differences between a relationship that's predicated on love and a relationship that's predicated on fear. Here's one of them. What does it mean when Yaakov Avinu comes in and he's got the goat skin hairs on his arms, and Yitzchak engages him in conversation and he says, how'd you get here so quickly? So he says, well, these are the animals that the Lord your God sent before me. Okay? Then he calls them close, and he feels them, and then he makes this suspicious, this skeptical pronouncement. I don't know, the voice is Yaakov's voice, but the arms are Esav's arms. If we're talking about the pitch of the voice, if we're talking about two brothers, even if they're twins, okay, they don't sound identical. Yeah. If we're talking about the pitch of his voice, the moment he opened his mouth, he should have said, 1 second, I call Yaakov. Eisav is supposed to be the one coming back from the hunt, and this sounds like Yaakov. So what does it mean when he says, I call Yaakov, only after Yaakov answers the question, how did you get back so quickly? Okay? So Rashi explains, Rashi is one of the classical medieval commentators on the Bible, and really this is taken from a super commentary on Rashi from the Guraye. He explains what Rashi means. He has a question. Rashi says, Eisav zeh ein shem shamayim shaga b'fiv. It wasn't a question of the pitch of the voice. It was a question of the style of speech, the idiom. Okay? Eisav is not a guy who says, Baruch Hashem, and Yitz Hashem, God willing, with God's help. He doesn't talk that way. A fellow who comes back to me and says, how'd you do the hunt so quickly and so successfully? He says, well, with God's help, I had a great hunt. That can't be Eisav. That's what it says in Rashi. So the super commentators on Rashi ask, what do you mean? 1 second. This was the same guy who asked his father, how do you tithe salt? Right? He's trying to pass himself off as some kind of a saint. Why wouldn't he say, God willing and God hoping and with God's help, why wouldn't he say that? Why wouldn't that be his style of speech? And here the Maharal says an amazing and deep insight. So let's talk about first, before we talk about in God relationships, let's talk about it in interpersonal relationships. Okay? When you're in love with somebody, okay, whether it's your child, your grandchild, your first adolescent crush, a significant other, when you're in love, you're always talking about the object of your love. You're talking about them, and even mentioning their name makes you happy, right? Invoking their name, gives you a rush, gives you a charge, and you come up with pet names and nicknames, and it's all about the names, and you buy them necklaces or pins or tie clips with their name on it. You personalize a card, right? It's all about their name. That's when you love somebody. How about if you're in fear, if you're in terror of somebody? Okay, and I know we're all erstwhile adults here in the room, but anyway, besides me, familiar with the Harry Potter series? Don't be afraid to admit it. Come on. Okay, good. I'm going to ask you the question. Okay, except for a few brave souls, okay, what is Voldemort called throughout the series?
The one.
Who?
The one whose name you can't mention.
The one who must not be named, right? And that's perfect. If you want to really capture the idea of a terrifying, awe-inspiring figure, right? The one who cannot be named, whose name must not be named, okay? The one whose name can't even be mentioned, okay? You come up with euphemisms, you come up with the Dark Lord, It's a different kind of nickname, It's all about that gulf that separates you and the object of your awe, or the object of your fear, object of your retribution, call it. Whatever it is that's inspiring that sense of shrinking, that sense of withdrawal that we identify with fear or awe. Here's the thing with Yitzchak Avinu. Eisav's my boy. Okay? It's not just a question of that he prepares me good meals. Both of my boys are good boys. They're both servants of God. Both monotheists. They're both wonderful guys. But this guy is my heir apparent. This guy serves the Lord the same way I do. I'm also afraid to mention God's name. I serve God out of awe. The other son takes after grandpa. The other son is a lover of God. I'm a fearer of God. I'm a God-fearing man. And Eisav is a boy after my own heart. He's a chip off the old block. Eisav's the same guy who asked me, because of his terror or fear, lest he have some kind of a shortfall in the performance of a mitzvah. He's asking me about how to tithe salt and how to tithe straw. It's all consistent. It's all of a piece. A guy like that isn't name-dropping God's name. He's not saying because he came back from a hunt. Oh, and remember, we're not talking about the way I say God's name. Hashem, that's a euphemism. The name. So that's I would never say Hashem in a ritual sense. When I pronounce a bracha, or when they read from the Torah on Shabbos, they pronounce my master, Aleph Daled Nun Yud. Even that's a euphemism for the unmentionable name of God, right? That's not what happened in the Bible. He actually said the name of God. Eisav doesn't talk that way. Eisav is not only a righteous man, a saintly man, a servant of God, but he's a servant of God in the same line as I am. This is my heir. This should be my crown. But this is the guy who I want to bring the message forward into the future, into eternity. Okay. Having said that, I want to share with you an idea which I think it's a little bit subtle. I hope that we don't get grabbed by the clock. I'm begging your forbearance, please. No more questions, till I finish this thought. But I also think it's important, and although it's a little bit subtle, it's not just going to be a exercise in biblical exegesis. I think it's something that we can incorporate into all of our lives. There's a famous epigram in Talmudic literature that talks about the great philosophical conundrum, which again I'm not going to address or resolve tonight. This one I don't think there's a class on. I don't think this one is resolvable. The issue of predestination versus free will. Divine foreknowledge, God knows everything, and yet we're not fatalists. We don't believe that we're destined to do good or bad. We're creatures of free will. We make our own beds. We're responsible for our own behavior. For our own thoughts, for our own words. We're responsible for everything. And the way the Talmud pithily expresses this is, this tension between providence and free will, is Hakol bidei shamayim, chutz mi'yirei shamayim. Everything is in the hands of heaven, except for the fear of heaven. Okay? Everything is in the hands of heaven. Our health, our wealth, our popularity, our ethical, our moral choices, if we'll be God-fearing people or not, that's up to us. Hakol b'dei shamayim, everything's in the hands of heaven, chutz me'ira shamayim, except for how one fears heaven. So many commentators ask a pretty obvious and glaring question. I just mentioned that there are two major motivations for relating to God and for exercising our moral and ethical choices. Love or fear? Why are we limiting it here to fear? The epigram should have read, everything is in the hands of heaven, except for the exercise of our ethical choices. Chutz me'avodas Hashem, except for the service of God. Service of God could be in any mode. The fear mode and the love mode. Why is it limiting it to how one fears heaven? Again, it doesn't mean one mitzvah out of 613. Whether or not we'll light Shabbos candles, that we're automatons. That God predestines. Whether or not we'll keep a kosher diet, that God predestines. Right? Oh, the one mitzvah out of 613. Will you fear God? That's not what it means. It means fearing God again as the underpinning for everything else. For everything that isn't explicit mitzvah, for everything that's extra legal, where we've got to exercise our free choice and then good decision making. It obviously means all of our exercise of free will. So why is it limited to why is it expressed in terms of fearing God? So one of the great rabbinic thinkers of the 20th century, of Yitzchak Hutner, explains it as follows. And here's another major difference between loving and fearing. He says, when we love, okay, obstacles are no obstacle. Obstacles are good. Obstacles validate things. Try to imagine Romeo and Juliet with Romeo already standing on the balcony. Right? Or Rapunzel, extend your hair, not let down your hair, right? It doesn't work, right? Most of our romantic literature is overcoming class differences, overcoming social differences, jungle fever, overcoming racial differences, right? It's all about, will love conquer? And the more the love has to conquer, the greater the love. All right? Fear doesn't work that way. When you fear something, it's not enough to say, well, you have a way of avoiding that which you dread. I don't want avoidance of that which I dread. I want elimination of that which I dread. Okay, imagine if I was a presidential candidate running on this platform. Nuclear disarmament? Not at all. I think we should have, a 50% increase in our ICBMs. But instead of a chicken in every pot, radioactive fallout shelter in every backyard. Right? Don't worry. If they drop the bomb on us, you'll be able to escape. Stock up on water, flashlights, canned goods. You'll be okay. I'm not interested in a bomb shelter. I'm not interested in 6-foot lead walls. I want the elimination of nuclear weaponry. Right? Nobody in Israel, I don't want to wax too geopolitical over here today, yeah? Nobody is trying to assuage Israel's fears about Iran by saying, we'll give you Star Wars. We'll give you, if they launch a bomb on you, you'll knock it out of the sky. I don't want to have to knock it out of the sky. I want to knock it out of the ground, now, before it has a chance to get into the sky. Right? When you fear something, okay, don't tell me, I can avoid it. What I want is that it should be eliminated. Now, drawing a parallel between this and the exercise of human free will, think of it this way. We're not robots. We're not automatons. We're singular among all of God's creatures. Now, think about this for a minute, okay? In the animal kingdom, an animal can be ferocious, can be venomous. Think snakes and lions, right? It can be very maternal. Think of a pigeon tending its young in its nest, right? Those are all morally neutral. Those are all instinctive. The lion isn't evil when it rips apart its prey. It's ferocious. It's violent. But violence and ferocity are not evil in an animal context. Nor is maternity, nor is the mothering of children. Again, it's totally instinctual. Totally instinctual. I'm not saying that human beings have no instincts that they have to deal with. But it's totally instinctual. And therefore, it's morally neutral. Human beings may have an inclination, they may have a tug, a pull, sometimes to be ferocious or violent or venomous, right? But they have the capacity to resist. Now, if I'm serving God because I love Him, okay? So I say to God, you know what? Give me an internal saboteur. Give me this yetzer hara, give me this inclination to evil. And the bigger it is, the better it is. The greater chance I have to validate my love for you. The greater obstacle I have to overcome. And to prove that I love you, that I would never do anything against, quote unquote, your interests or what you feel are my best interests. Okay? When you serve God out of fear, okay, what is sin? What is crime? What is evil? Okay? Evil is an H-bomb. It's a nuclear bomb. One nuclear bomb can ruin your whole day. You know?
It's true.
And it's like this bipolar disorder. On the one hand, look, I'm a human being. I don't want to be an angel or an amoeba or anything in between. I don't want to be one of these pre-programmed of your creatures. I know I'm a human being, and I know I have to serve you, and I can't serve you without the capacity for sin. Again, sin, not the capacity for violence or venom, for sin, for a negative moral charge in what I'm about to do. So I've got to have an inclination to evil. But an inclination to evil is an atom bomb. I don't want the atom bomb. Don't tell me, well, you've got a bomb shelter called your yetzer tov. You also have an inclination to good. You can resist it. You can save yourself from it. I don't want to be saved from it. I want it eliminated. So whenever you're serving God out of fear, there's this like dynamic tension. There's this pendulation going on. You're almost bipolar when you're serving God. I'm serving God. I want my inclination to evil. I fear God. I hate my inclination to evil. Destroy it. It scares me. I don't want to have to deal with that obstacle. Yeah? So our sages expressed, if you will, the chiddush, the almost perverse thing of serving God through fear. Of course it's true that when you serve God out of love, that's also up to you. You're not pre-programmed. Right? But there's something unique, there's something self-contradictory in serving God out of fear. And the way he concludes it is, he says, a person cannot appreciate the richness, the wealth of bechira, of human free will, until they come to a recognition of the danger and of the risk of human free will. Think risk-reward. In gambling, in investing, in the age of Madoff, they're the same thing, gambling and investing. Right? And you go to Atlantic City, you put one chip on the roulette table. If you lose, you're not going to lose that much. If you win, you're not going to win that much. Right? You put 100 chips on a number, you stand a lot to lose, but you stand an incredible amount to gain. So until you come to some kind of an appreciation for how dangerous it is to be human, if you will. Okay? Human beings, how did Mark Twain say? Human beings are the only one of God's creatures with the capacity to blush or the need to. Right? When you come to understand what it means, you know, how much worse than a venomous snake or a ferocious lion a venomous or ferocious human being is, right? Only then can you come to appreciate what a richness, what a blessing it is to resist ferocity and to resist venom and to be a moral, good, ethical person, a nurturing person, like the mother bird bring the worms to the little kids in the nest. Yeah? So now listen to this conversation. Make a little bit more sense of it. It's bizarre when you read it on a hyper-literal way. Eisav comes back from the hunt, and he says, I'm about to die, what do I need the birthright for? Here, you take the birthright. Yeah? What birthright are we talking about over here? Does this mean that when Dad dies, when Isaac, that blind man finally dies, and he's got 3,000 herd of cattle, that I'm going to take 2,000 and my kid brothers only take 1,000? That's what they're wrangling about? That's what Jacob was being so deceptive about? That's not what Jewish tradition teaches. What Jewish tradition teaches is that before the sin of the golden calf, the ultimate in divine service, the service that was rendered in the tabernacle while the Jews were wandering in the desert, or ultimately in the temple in Jerusalem, was something that was supposed to be done by the firstborn. It was only as a result of the fact that the firstborn worshiped the golden calf, whereas the tribe of the Levites did not, that the swap happened. But plan A was didn't matter which tribe you were from, which family from, the firstborn of every family was the one who was supposed to be dedicated to the service of God. I just saw an amazing exegesis. I never knew this, and I'm pretty old by now. You have your living Torahs open. I'll just show you the verse.
Okay.
I'm getting to it. The very first Bechar, the very firstborn in human history, on page 17. Okay? Top of page 17, chapter 4, verse 1. The man knew his wife Eve. She conceived and gave birth to Cain. She said, I have gained a man with God. Okay, I don't have to read more. The author of the Tur Shulchan Aruch, has a commentary on the Chumash, on the Torah. He translates it differently. He says that not I have gained a man with God, I have gained a man for God. For God. She was dedicating her firstborn son. I want my firstborn son to be the one who dedicates his life totally to the service of God. I don't want him working the fields. I don't want him raising cattle. I want him to be a meditative. However, the service of God was rendered in that the dawn of mankind. But that's what she was saying. And his mother was dedicating him to God. Because there's a long time-honored tradition, this idea that the ultimate in divine service goes to the firstborn. So I want to ask you, okay, I'll go around the table for a second. If I had to ask you a primer, what's temple service all about? What would you say? Temple service. We had a temple in Jerusalem. What they do there? What was a typical day in the Beis Hamikdash, in the Holy Temple?
Get closer to God.
I'm not talking about objectives. On the ground, what did they do there?
They sacrifice.
Okay, they brought sacrifices. Anything else? Can you think of anything else?
Offered incense.
Okay, incense offering. Yeah, it's true. They used to smoke incense. Yeah.
They made food, they made bread.
Okay. Well, not exactly. They made food. They were doing things with bread. Right. They had meal offerings. They had bread offerings. Anything else?
Redemption,
Redemption of what? The firstborn cattle.
or they brought things in exchange. I guess sacrifice would be.
Okay. Sacrifice we had already. Anything else? Yes.
They sang and praised Hashem.
That's right. They had a choir there. They had an orchestra there. Anything else? Holiday of Hanukkah. Remind anyone of anything?
Dedication.
Oh, the lamp.
They lit a menorah. Right. There was a menorah. There was showbread. You're right. Maybe that's what you meant by baking. They had the showbread. They had a table. Okay. In 40 seconds, I gave you a primer of basically what was done in the temple. So I say as follows. The subtextual conversation going on over here was, Eisav comes from the field, and he says, give me that red stuff. And Yaakov says to him, fine, if you sell me your Bechorah. So far it's not subtextual, so far it's right there in the Chumash. Here's subtextual. Eisav says, okay, we're not fighting about who's going to get the extra 1,000 head of cattle. Obviously, you mean the service in the temple. So tell me, what's it all about? Mativa shel b'chorazu. You see the Rashi's ad locum. This is how Rashi explains the conversation. Mativa shel b'chorazu. What's this b'chora, this extra divine service in the temple? What's it all about? So now, if I wasn't interested in wresting the b'chora from Eisav, I would have answered what we just said in this class in 30 seconds. You want to know what temple service is all about? Psh, unbelievable, like you said, you hit it on the nail head. There's so many vehicles, there's so many means to achieve the end of getting closer to God that's not available to the rank and file. You can bring animal offerings, you can bring meal offerings, and you can enlighten the world with the light of the menorah, and this incense cloud, especially on Yom Kippur, the incense cloud in the inner sanctum, it's supposed to bring down the divine Shekhinah, the divine indwelling, all kinds of wonderful, rarefied stuff. Right? You know what Yaakov actually answered him? He said, high-risk occupation. A lot of ways to incur divine wrath, divine death penalty. Shtuyayayim, Purei Rosh, you go into the temple, okay, DWI, davening while intoxicated, okay,
That's good.
right? Under the influence, you go in shikr, that's a way that you can incur the death penalty. You go in ungroomed, okay, Purei Rosh, your hair is too long. That's another way. Very dangerous. Much more dangerous than putting on tefillin or lighting Shabbos candles. It's a high-risk occupation. To that, Eisav responded, I'm a drama king. I'm going to die of hunger right now. Hine anochi halach lamus. I'm just going to die over it. What do I need it for? What do I need this extra additional temple service above and beyond what rank and file human beings do to serve God? What do I need that for? Ladies and gentlemen, you know what that is? That's a guy who only sees the risk, who doesn't see the reward. You want to know what the dross, what the waste byproduct of a Yitzchak Avinu is, of an Isaac, our patriarch, who is an Oved Hashem Meir, who serves God out of awe? Somebody who's only got the awe with none of the service. He doesn't want to be bipolar. I'm afraid of sin, but I don't appreciate the fact that the greater the capacity for sin, the greater the capacity for merit, the greater the capacity for service. The more powerful my little inner demon is, the stronger I have to be. That part he doesn't appreciate. He only sees the death. Hine anochi halach lamus. Okay? Was Yaakov Avinu leading the witness? Absolutely. He had his number. He knew who he was dealing with. And I say, parenthetically, just to answer your question a little bit, that Eisav, by this point, had already committed his first homicide, his first rape, his first adultery. And Yaakov Avinu's motivation was, I don't want a Russia. It doesn't behoove, and Rebecca also, the mother, a Russia like this, a hypocrite, this chazafisel guy, maybe, he's got some elements of that in him, but ultimately, okay, this is not a good man. This is not a person who should be doing the divine service.
Where does it say that he's a rapist and a murderer?
It doesn't say any of this.
So, in other words, the Torah that we're reading has been interpreted by the rabbis.
No. Let me correct you. Our belief is that the Torah that was given at Sinai is a double Torah. There's a written Torah and there's an oral Torah.
Exactly.
Right.
And in the oral Torah, God spoke to Moses, passed it on to Joshua, and continued.
Correct.
And he told him specifically that he was a murderer and a rapist.
Yes. Correct.
This was that conversation.
Correct.
Okay.
This is the oral Torah. In the passage that we read before, though, in the Torah, it seemed to me he's saying, what good will this do to me if I'm not going to live because of my hunger? It didn't sound as though he was saying, what good is this going to do to me?
You're right. You're right. And there are more what we call the pashtanim, the more literal exegesis of the Torah that do take that approach. But there are difficulties with every approach. Does it really make sense that a guy who is a professional hunter, as described earlier, spends a day in the field and now he's going to expire from hunger?
It doesn't say he spent a day in the field. He came back from a hunt. He could have been out there for a month looking for food.
Okay, that is probably the way it is. What?
Maybe he suffered from low blood sugar.
Or maybe he was talking drama king.
Well, what you do know is that Jacob, who is now being elevated for whatever reason by the rabbis, was the one who basically said to God, with no sense of surrender, no sense of humility, unless you bless me. I mean, he wasn't saying, I love God, I want to serve God. He was looking for something in return. And without that...
To God?
Yeah.
Or to his father, you mean?
When he fought with the angel. Do we remember?
Yeah.
What he spoke of at that moment.
I'm not sure which verse you're referring to offhand.
I'll find it.
Okay.
He wouldn't let him go.
Right.
And his direct command was, unless you bless me.
Right.
Now, his attitude toward God is not one of humility.
His attitude towards God or to the angel of God?
Well, if God sent the angel, I'm assuming the angel represents God.
Again, a bad assumption.
Okay, so we got angels floating around doing their own thing, and then God's like someplace else.
Do you have something in the text that says what the angel's mission was? Why was Yaakov attacked by the angel at that moment?
I would like to know.
Struggle that they had where he stayed up all night and they had that struggle.
There are a lot of different interpretations. Okay.
But that's the point. They are interpretations. Am I right? And my interpretation in reading it is quite different than what you're saying.
Okay.
And I'm not saying that to confront you or challenge you or to be disrespectful.
Well, why not? That's perfectly okay.
You're a learned person. Otherwise I wouldn't be sitting here.
Okay.
But what you're taking out of the Torah is not the way that I read it.
Okay.
I don't see this brother, who may have been a very earthy, ruddy hunter, and maybe God did not look upon that with favor.
Right.
But I don't see him as a rapist and a murderer and every other rotten thing you can come
But
up
that's
with.
because
But-
we're not learned
It's a
people,
field man.
and
No,
we
but-
are in this class, and the rabbi has learned it, and you have to just take a leap of faith that he has access to this other knowledge that he's bringing into this class.
No, look.
But didn't Isaac
My
prefer-
survey has to do with that.
But didn't you say that Isaac preferred Eisav?
Yes, he did.
So, and Isaac preferred him not because of the meat, but for all these other reasons, which made
Right.
Isaac sound...
Which is also, incidentally, nowhere in the text. You've also got to take my word about that about the commentaries.
Look at that part
Right.
of it. Isaac had, Esau had many admirable qualities. And if, I thought I heard you say
Right.
before, that Jacob was worried that when he was going to meet Isaac again, because Isaac had gained so much merit because he was respectful of his parents.
Correct.
Again, a worthy person.
But that's not the text.
Well, but nonetheless, if he was deemed
There's
worthy-
nothing in the text itself about Esav's superlative honoring of his father, other than the fact that it seems to be that he was his feeder. He was the main one bringing him food.
Or maybe he was fearful.
The Talmud reveals to us that, among other things, he had special royal clothes that he donned every time he served his father, and that's nowhere in the text. Okay,
But-
listen, you have excellent questions. Okay, and rather than a leap of faith, okay, or make me into some kind of world-renowned scholar, which I'm very far from. Okay, I just have to tell you the following. Again, you're manifesting the questions in a specific class about understanding the relationship between Eisav and Yaakov, or what I was really trying to do tonight was, the essence of Eisav. But the thing with the oral Torah is as follows. Okay, you can say, and you can be skeptical, and it's you didn't surrender your rationality when you walked through the door of the Jewish Heritage Center tonight. That's not a prerequisite for entering over here. Be very skeptical. Where does it say any of this? You're reading a tremendous amount into the text. Where do you see this? It seems to turning the text on its ear. That's all very well and good. But suffice it to say that without the oral tradition, we don't know the ABCs of Torah. We don't know anything. Okay? If you want to be a hyper-literalist, the only thing that you've got to do to be what we call a Shomer Shabbos, to be a Shabbos observer, is to avoid building fires. Nowhere in the Torah it talks about the centrality of Sabbath observance many times. It's one of the Ten Commandments. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. Observe the Sabbath day to keep it holy. Nowhere does it say, how do I keep the Sabbath? What does it mean to keep the Sabbath? Right? For example.
What you're saying is
Right.
the oral law, the Talmud,
Right.
and I've had this discussion with rabbis, and I
Right.
still don't get it,
Okay.
is basically building on the Torah. And what I am saying is that there are many times in the Talmud,
Right.
it is directly opposed to the Torah. So what am I supposed to believe, the Word of God, or what the rabbis tell me?
You're supposed to believe that there is no intrinsic contradiction between the Word of God and the Word.
Intrinsic contradiction.
Let me ask you a more basic question. How do you
There are.
how do you
Have
know
you read it? Yes, there are.
how do you know that this is the Word of God? How do you know that the Torah that we read, the text that we're reading from today, is what was given to Moses at Sinai?
Well, actually, this translation that you have is craziness.
Okay.
But do I think that every single word in the Torah is written exactly? No, I do not.
Neither do I.
But
There's something called a Kriya and a Ksiv. We have problems in the Messiah. There are slight variations.
do I have any
We acknowledge
doubt
that.
whatsoever
Right.
that Moses or the Jewish people or Sinai took place? None. I
Okay.
am convinced of that. And I believe that God revealed himself.
Fine.
However, how you interpret that or how you describe that, if you go someplace, you see something, you describe it your way.
Right.
Somebody else goes to the same place, they describe it their way. It's not identical. And it's not, unlike the Ten Commandments, carved in stone. And there are things in the Torah that the rabbis have turned upside down in every which way.
Okay.
And
But,
they don't mesh.
I want to ask you a question. How do you know that the Ten Commandments were carved in stone? Because it's written in the Torah, right?
Let me ask you something
Right.
else. You believe in the Torah, you know it much better than I ever will. You're saying everything is the same. When Deborah and Barak had their victory that God gave them,
Yes,
and they sing a song, is that correct?
they do.
And they sing that song together.
Very bloodthirsty song.
Okay. You're an Orthodox rabbi.
Yes.
Do women sing in your shul?
They do not.
Okay. So the singing is fine for God because he gave them peace for 40 years or whatever, but the singing is not fine in shul. So how does that work?
Okay.
And
Before we
that's
get...
my last question because I took you off the topic.
Okay, before we get to Barak, actually, do you mind if before I address your question on Dvorah, if I bring this class in for the landing?
Very confusing.
Okay. No. I'm not going to address your question. I want to bring in this class for the landing. Okay. So what I'm trying to say is as follows, as far as the interpretation of the interplay between the midos of Yitzchak and the midah of Eisav. I'm positing over here, and this I will tell you, this is not in the Talmud. This is my own interpretation, so you're perfectly free to take it or leave it. This is certainly not etched in stone. But the way I understand it, filtering, trying to process what it says in the major commentaries, is that Yitzchak is, again, the paradigm of an Oved Meira, somebody who serves God out of fear, which means he's got this tension and this understanding of both the risk factor and the reward factor, whereas Eisav is a fellow who only zeroes in on the risk and does not see the reward. Okay. What I think that has to do with more than just biblical exegesis, but how we live our lives and how we want to progress and actualize ourselves and grow in our relationships with other people and with God, is that very often we have a tendency to plateau. We have a tendency to stagnate in terms of, I don't want to be a risk taker. Okay? There's a certain cautiousness when we're young, a little bit more reckless. We're more reckless in our relationships, we're more reckless with our investments. Very often we take that as a sign of maturity, that, well, I really was not able to assess risks before. I would never expose myself like that. I would never expose myself to rejection. I would never expose myself to failure. I'm not going out on a limb anymore. Okay? And sometimes, I'm not saying that's all you got to be a big leap in life. But sometimes if you don't want to stagnate, even in our own little itty-bitty baby steps, our piecemeal steps that we take every day, we have to look not just at the hassle and the risk and the exposure to ridicule that continued progress can bring us. We also have to look at the reward factor. Yeah, it's riskier because it's more rewarding. It's riskier. It takes more in terms of time. It takes more in terms of effort. It takes more in terms of possible exposure to ridicule, to bucking a societal trend. A lot of things in our life that involve risk-taking. But if we never take those risks, if we only concentrate on the hine anochi halach lamus, I'm just going to die, okay? We don't look at the flip side. That sometimes with the greater risk comes greater reward. That's very dangerous. That culminates in a person who's finished, who's asu, who's a complete person, teeth, hair, no room for development, no room for growth the second they're born. It's not what you want to be.
Interesting.
So that's not where you want to go, where you want to be. Okay. I have to admit ignorance on the Barak. All right, that's my class for tonight, ladies and gents. I don't know if anyone else...